Madam Secretary is here for another reason, but I'm going to use it for 2 seconds. The fastest growing port and the #1 export port in the nation, thanks to the great work that you're doing. We're striving to provide the best services we can to our customers, working together, and we're happy and pleased to be able to share that with Secretary Yellen. We're also so pleased to have Mayor Van Johnson with us today, a good friend of the ports. For 20 years, Mayor Johnson has served Savannah with his unique skill set, working among the community with the businesses across the Georgia coast. He is leading a dynamic and growing city with many business and industry growing. He's doing a great job. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Van Johnson. Okay.
Thank you and good afternoon. On an absolutely beautiful day in the world's greatest city, we call us Savannah, and we're so excited about today and certainly to be out here at the Georgia ports. All of our friends that have been aforementioned as well. I've heard from both Senators Warnock and Ossoff this morning, and they send their regards as well as their team members being here. And to our beloved friends at ILA 1414, ILA 1475, and 2046, and all of the folks at Georgia Ports who make this happen every day. Let's give them all a big round of applause. And certainly what makes Savannah so awesome and so phenomenal, among the many, many things that we have enjoyed and that we continue to show the world, is what you see happening around us. The largest single container terminal in the Western Hemisphere. The busiest export container port in the country. And a port that, despite the pandemic and all of the challenges that we face, never closed and kept things moving. And we give ourselves a big round of applause for that. The Port of Savannah is driving America, and we are very happy about that. And the U.S. Corps of Engineers is helping us to make that happen as well. I wanted to briefly thank the Biden-Harris administration and all the work that they've done, because they've hit the ground running to implement the bipartisan infrastructure law, and is certainly delivering results for us here. Since the bipartisan infrastructure law passed, approximately $4.5 billion has been announced for transportation, which obviously is important to us. $359 million for clean water, which is important to us. Georgia's received in excess of $1.3 billion to connect every single Georgian to reliable, high-speed internet. And as of today, over 656,000 Georgia households are already saving on their monthly internet bills due to this wonderful piece of bipartisan legislation. And we know that there is certainly a lot more that can be done. And if you're a praying person like me, I hope this shutdown does not happen, because this shutdown affects everyone. And so I'm hoping in D.C. they can work together like we do here in Georgia and like we do here in Savannah, to help us to remain competitive, to help us continue to lead the pack. We need to continue to widen, and we need to continue to go deeper. And we'll be making those asks in the future. Finally, before I announce our next distinguished speaker, we are just so happy to have Madam Secretary Dr. Janet Yellen, a fellow Brooklynite, here in Savannah. She is not only a renowned public servant, but a renowned economist, someone who has served with distinction in every place she has served, not only to be the first female to lead a central bank, but certainly her service on the Federal Reserve and certainly the Department of Treasury has certainly made us all proud. And we're so honored, Madam Secretary, to have you here. And let's give her a big round of applause. And so my task is to introduce our chairman, Kent Fountain serves as president and CEO of Southeastern Gin and Peanut Incorporated in Surrency. That sounds pretty good. Gin and peanuts. Fountain attended the University of Georgia, Go Dogs, where he obtained a degree in agricultural economics. And in 1995, he began Southeastern Gin Incorporated, and in 2004, built a peanut buying point, and the firm became Southeastern Gin and Peanut Incorporated. In 2015, he was instrumental in starting Peanut Premium LLC, where he currently serves as chairman. The recipient of numerous awards, Fountain received the Southeastern Ginner of the Year Award in 2001 and the Horace Hayden National Ginner of the Year Award in 2006. And so they live in Scranton. We're glad that our friends, and we're glad that he's our chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman Kent Fountain.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Johnson, and thank you all for coming. And as Griff said, especially the ILA and our port employees and staff for coming, and we welcome you here. As you can see behind us, the Port of Savannah is an economic engine helping to drive the economic vitality of our state and nation. The Port of Savannah is one of the fastest growing ports in the nation, handling 5.4 million TEUs last year, which is nearly double from 10 years ago. As an exporter of cotton, peanuts, and cottonseed, I can attest that this is the best port to do business with, but I can't stress enough the importance of infrastructure inside the port and outside the port to continue to grow. Georgia's internationally recognized supply chain network and its connectivity to the heartland of the nation are powerful factors in consistently being ranked in the top state in which to do business. We were named by CNBC as a top state for infrastructure in the United States. We're proud to showcase this tremendous national asset to our honored guest today, Madam Secretary Janet Yellen. Secretary Yellen plays a vital role as a steward of U.S. economic and financial systems and ensuring our country's ongoing leadership in the world economy. As economist by trade, Secretary Yellen took office in 2021 after almost 50 years in academia and public service, and thank you for that. She is the first person in American history to have led the White House Council of Economic Advisors, the Federal Reserve, and the Treasury Department. A New York City native, Secretary Yellen graduated from Brown University and went on to earn her PhD at Yale University. She was an assistant professor at Harvard University when she began working at the Federal Reserve Board. In 1994, President Bill Clinton appointed Dr. Yellen to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. 3 years later, he named her chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. In 2004, Secretary Yellen rejoined the Federal Reserve, this time as president of the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. In 2010, President Barack Obama appointed her vice chair of the Federal Reserve before nominating her to become the nation's top central banker. Secretary Yellen chaired the Federal Reserve from 2014 to 2018. In 2020, President Biden nominated her to the cabinet post of Secretary of Treasury. Please give me a warm welcome, Georgia welcome to Secretary Janet Yellen.
Thank you so much, Chairman Fountain, for that lovely introduction, and President and CEO Lynch and Mayor Johnson for welcoming us here and showing us by far the most impressive port I've ever visited in my life, and introducing us to the dedicated men and women who make this work. Thank you so much for what you're doing for the country, and the developments here are so impressive. I'd like to begin by speaking about the sad news of Senator Feinstein's passing. Senator Feinstein was a giant in the Senate, a champion for Californians, and a trailblazer for women. Our nation is indebted to her for her life of service, and my thoughts are with her family at this time. I'd also like to address the potential looming government shutdown. When I left Washington this morning, it was still unclear whether Congress would pass legislation in time to avoid a dangerous and unnecessary shutdown. The Senate is advancing a bipartisan short-term funding bill, and it's crucial that the House Republicans also do their jobs and move quickly to keep the government open and adequately fund key priorities as they agreed in May. Over the past 2.5 years, we've undergone an historic economic recovery. Unemployment is near historic lows and inflation is down substantially for the long term. The failure of House Republicans to act would hurt American families and cause economic headwinds that could undermine the progress we're making. A shutdown would impact many key government functions, from loans to farmers and small businesses, to food and workplace safety inspections, to Head Start programs for children. And it could delay major infrastructure improvements. As I'll describe in my remarks today, these projects change the lives and livelihoods of Americans across the country, and they build our economic strength. Well, I'm very glad to be in Savannah today to explain why these projects are so important. The Port of Savannah looks very different than it did 2 years ago. And it's just one example of what's been happening at a very fast pace across the country. When President Biden came into office, the administration faced the shock of COVID-19. 1 year later, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that was another unexpected shock. We also faced structural challenges, including low productivity growth and entrenched income inequality, as well as regional divergences. We responded with the American Rescue Plan, and over the past 2.5 years, we've succeeded in driving an historic economic recovery. And we've also been building the economy we need for the long term, including through a trifecta of legislation: the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's working. As one example, since January of 2021, our policies and investments have led companies to commit over $500 billion in manufacturing and clean energy investments. There are many important aspects of the President's Investing in America agenda. They're all rooted in what I call modern supply-side economics, growing our economy's long-run productive capacity while addressing inequality and climate change. And today I'll focus my remarks on one way we're doing this: through investments in infrastructure like those being made here in Savannah. Until the bipartisan infrastructure law, public investments in infrastructure had fallen each decade since the 1960s. Much of our country's infrastructure was decades old, and we felt it when we slowed down on crumbling highways on our way to work or driving our children to school. We saw it in communities across the country that lacked access to the reliable, fast internet that participation in the digital economy requires. And we knew it wasn't prepared for one of the greatest challenges we face globally. Climate change poses tremendous risks to our already vulnerable infrastructure. And we need investments in green infrastructure to reduce emissions and achieve a clean energy future. In my remarks today, I'll speak about how investments in infrastructure change how we live and work and with that, our economy. These investments fuel long-term economic growth, they build economic resilience, and they increase economic opportunity. Very simply, they are good economics, and that's why they're at the heart of our Investing in America agenda. I'll start with the impact of infrastructure on economic growth, and I'll use an example that's relatable to many of us. In cities from Atlanta to Chicago, roads are congested from traffic for upwards of 4 hours a day on average. In other cities, this average is closer to 6, and this cuts into work time and makes our schedules less predictable. Well, investments in infrastructure change that, making us more productive. And individual productivity gains, when aggregated, have a significant impact on economic growth. According to one analysis, a 10% increase in public capital investments in core physical infrastructure increases productivity by more than 2%. And due in large part to this productivity increase, public investments in infrastructure grow national output by as much as 1.2% in the long run for every 10% increase in public capital investment. Public investment in infrastructure spurs private investment that magnifies the impacts. And these investments create jobs. Investments in broadband, for example, demand new jobs in installation, maintenance, and repair. And these are good paying jobs, many of them for Americans who don't have college degrees. The impact on growth is one reason this administration is investing $110 billion to repair roads and bridges. Billions more are being spent on passenger rail and airports, and $17 billion in new public investments has enabled port infrastructure and waterway projects across the country. Here in Georgia, funding will help repair the almost 300 bridges and over 2,000 miles of highway in poor condition, as just one example. But economic growth is only part of the story. The COVID-19 pandemic not only affected our health and well-being, it also revealed tremendous challenges to our economic resilience. In the initial months of the pandemic, Americans across the country walked into grocery stores to find that they lacked basic essentials. We waited for shipments of everyday items that never arrived. We watched prices for key goods increase. In response, the administration acted quickly. We launched a supply chain disruptions task force to address short-term supply bottlenecks. The task force worked closely with state and local governments and private businesses to get the most we could out of existing infrastructure. The country's largest ports shifted to full-time operations, newly utilizing off-peak hours. And the Federal Department of Transportation enabled pop-up container yards here in Georgia, freeing up crucial space close to the port of Savannah. These early actions contributed to goods flowing more smoothly and helped mitigate a driver of higher prices. We're still seeing the positive impacts. In May, the Global Supply Chain Pressure Index, which measures supply chain disruptions, fell to its lowest point since 2008 after having peaked in December of 2021. But the shock of COVID-19 comes alongside persistent ongoing shocks from our changing climate. In the early months of this administration, a freeze left more than 10 million Texans without electricity. Last month's Hurricane Idalia destroyed homes that weren't prepared for the impact, and this means short-term actions need to be complemented by building long-term resilience, and that too depends on infrastructure. In anticipation of a world with increasingly severe and frequent weather events, we're making investments that ensure we're better prepared for a next pandemic or climate-related event. This includes investments to bolster grid resilience, such as over $17 million to prevent outages in Georgia. We're investing to prevent floods from destroying homes and to rehabilitate or remove aging dams. And we're supporting pre-disaster resilience. Resilience is not just about adaptation, though. It's about reducing environmental damage and building the clean energy future we need. At airports, funding is supporting projects that increase energy efficiency. At ports, it's going to reduce or eliminate toxic air pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions. The fact that over a quarter of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation means investing in clean vehicles is also a priority. The bipartisan infrastructure law includes $7.5 billion to build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations that tackles a long-time barrier to the EV market's growth. And the incentives of the Inflation Reduction Act complement these investments. For example, the IRA provides a tax credit of up to $7,500 for new clean vehicles and another tax credit for EV charging stations. Like other investments in infrastructure, investments in EV manufacturing are creating good-paying, middle-class jobs. And targeted programs such as the Department of Energy's Industrial Assessment Centers ensure that workers have pathways into them. Finally, infrastructure investment is crucial to increasing opportunity for all Americans. Today, the internet is as essential for many Americans as plumbing and electricity. Yet, more than 8.5 million households and small businesses across the country have no high-speed internet infrastructure. Investing in broadband infrastructure, therefore, not only fuels growth, it builds resilience, and it broadens economic opportunity, enabling children to reach higher levels of educational attainment and their parents to apply for jobs and run modern businesses. In Georgia, over 300,000 homes and small businesses have not had access to high-speed infrastructure, but thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, the state will receive $1.3 billion to expand access to all. Lead removal is another example of how infrastructure investments can expand economic opportunity. Millions of Americans get their water through lead pipes and service lines. So do 400,000 schools and child care facilities. Lead exposure can cause cognitive impairment, threatening outcomes like educational attainment. And like with access to broadband, lead pipe distribution maps onto racial and income disparities. In Georgia, the bipartisan infrastructure law is allocating $95 million for lead pipe and service line replacement, and almost $100 million for safe drinking water. And these investments enable healthier and more productive lives, benefiting our whole economy. Across a broad range of areas, we've also been designing these investments to reach those who need them most. Take the $3 billion for the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, which provides grants for high-speed internet on tribal lands, or the Department of Agriculture's Reconnect program, focused on rural areas, or the fact that the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits are enhanced for investments in coal communities and other communities that historically have relied on the fossil fuel industry for employment. Over 80% of IRA-related investments are in counties with lower college graduation rates than the national average. And these policy choices not only help those directly benefit, they also increase the broader economic impact of these investments. For example, adding employment opportunities in distressed places generates substantially greater economic benefits than similarly increasing opportunities elsewhere. Well, it's exciting to be here in Savannah at the nation's third busiest port. This port's ability to receive and ship goods effectively and efficiently matters tremendously for our country's economic strength. Deepening the Savannah Harbor will be transformative in enabling more heavily loaded vessels to enter and exit the harbor more easily. And $48 million for the bipartisan infrastructure law will support environmental monitoring for the next decade. Estimates project that every dollar invested in this project will bring about $7 in benefits in our economy. And the changes happening here and those across the country also depend on strong local and state support. The Georgia Ports Authority was a key player in troubleshooting critical supply chain issues early in the COVID-19 pandemic, and it continues to spearhead ambitious developments. Elected state officials have played an important role. And across the country, from upgrading highways to supporting the battery belt emerging in the Midwest and South, American workers are the main enablers of progress. Building the future we need depends on each of us continuing this work. Our collective efforts are ensuring that Americans can live healthy and productive lives, and they're shaping a new future for our children and generations to come. We'll see this future in small day-to-day changes. The roads we drive on, the cars we drive, the water we drink, and we'll see it in much larger changes. We're boosting our country's economic strength and competitiveness. We're improving its ability to withstand the next freeze or hurricane, and we're creating good-paying jobs, including for those who have too often been left behind. This is the impact of modern supply-side economics, and President Biden's focus on infrastructure is no exception. So thank you so much for allowing me to tour this fantastic port and for joining me today. Thank you.